Okay. So if we start now, we'll have an extra minute or two.
Chenmo Chongden de Xin Xian Da Zhongguo Liang Da Fu San Ye Fa Da Xian Zu Denbo Dewa Xie Ji Den Jiu Du Ka Lo Yu Bo Na Na Me Ba Ha Na Me Na Ye Dong Ba San Ye Chongden de Be Ye Wa Xia Ya Tu Bo Cha Che Do Jiao Su Je Denbo Chongden de Xin Xian Da Zhongguo Liang Da San Ye Rikwa Tang Xia Zong Denbora Dewa Xebo Jiten Jianbo Jibu Jibu Kalo Yurubo Lana Eba Lana Meta Dongbo Sanje Chongde De Peje Wa Xia Tubo La Xia De Lo Chelo Dongbo Chongde De Xin Xianbo La Chongbo Yang Da War Zongde San Ye Rikwa Da Xia Zong Denbo Dewa Jiden Jianbo Jibu Jibu Kalo Yurubo Lana Eba Lana Mena Ye Dongbo Sanje Chongde Peje Wa Xia Tubo La Xia De Lo Chelo Ante Kanye Zuo Jedan De Sajin De La Gongpa Tubo Ane Jiden De Na Joje Su De Tse Jeba Jela Cha Nanda Gongwa Jodo Zuzan Wa Ishe Jaso Seje Rongpo Taba Jiden Zuna Lame Wa Gongpo Junye Jela Cha Sanjo Denpa Jime Lawe Cha Serdo Tawa Jela Cha Durje Jela Ziba Zuma Je Nyame Junye Jela Cha Obo Tuje Jendenpa Tamje Gembe Dombo Sona Yende Yazo Je Deshin Shela Cha Labe Teja Jewa Yu Gewe Nyezo Lejo Sedo Dandan Juyurba Jiyu Jula Cha Wane Dove Layan Laba Dala Rabdune Shinge Damba Yandende Gindu Layan Cha Chalo Dipa Chiyan Mijaji Gewa Bunzun Zopagyu Rangi Sene Yonzu Dene Sange Tembayin Kama Rari Mamenda Yuma Sepa Shukurita Melan Lodan Tinda Bo Dije Junan Didanda Sonam Di Tamje Sipayi Kovan Done Jinje Radune Kada Nadan Chive Lapchukte Sibe Tole Do Sho.
To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the full destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, Lord of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakti clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When the supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you, who were wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, form supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. Your immaculate 3 worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity which makes one free from attachment, the virtue which frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality, to that dharma which pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts. To you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions. Perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Do these merits make sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the foe of false, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death? Alright, so drop page 4.
Tanju sembe kinde shimbo tang tang je tu shote te te chonde te samo nangwa shi chawe chuke nangka inge tenla nyongpo shuzo yang de te chanju semba semba jimbo kongpa tere shi onchu shirab je paro samo je bo nye la namba ta shin kumbo ngabo te ta la ya ra je je tongpa namba ta wo tene sanje je chu te lan tenpa shawe chanju semba semba jimbo kongpa tere shi onchu Rige bo kala la sherabke paru samo jeba jeba deba de la baja dege cheme pata janju semba semba jembo papa jere se onju ki seda demba shari da de dege cheme so shari bo rige bo kala la sherabke paru chemba samo jeba jeba deba idar namba dawa jade pombo ngabo de la ya ra jige tomba namba Jesu Tao Su Tongpa Wo Tongpa Ni Su 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 Le Tongpa Ni Shen Ma Yin Tongpa Ni Le Yang Su Shen Ma Yin No Te Shen Tu So Wa Tang Tu Shi Tang Nambar She Pa Tang Tongpa Wo She Ri Da Che Tang Je Tongpa Ni De Sin Yin Me Pa Ma Je Pa Ma Ka Pa Ti Ma Me Pa Ti Ma Tang Te Wa Me Pa Ka Wa Me Pa She Ri Bu De Da We Na Tongpa Ni La Su Me So Wa Me Tu Shi Me Nambar She Pa Me Me Na Wa Me Na Me Che Me Lu Me Yi Me Su Me Ja Me Chi Me Rome, Jami, Chume, Ije Game, Ije Navar Jebe, Kadi, Badu, Yamedo, Mariba, Seba, Meba, Kaji, Sebe, Badu, Yamedo, Teje, Dodonga, Wada, Gunju, Wada, Gobana, Lame, Jebe, Toba, Mema, Toba, Yamedo, De Davana, Janju, Sembana, Toba, Medici, Ye Parodo, Chimbala, Teji, Nede, Semla, Tiba, Meji, Java, Medi, Chinji, Lone, Chindu, Dene, Yangele, Debe, Tara, Chindu, Tuzo, the number of sugar, Chiraje, Parodo, Chimbala, Tene, Lana, Meba, Yanda, Varzobe, Janju, Mobodo, Sangizo, the Dawena, Chirage, Parodo, Chimbena, Riba Jimbo, Lana, Mebena, Minyamba, Nyambena, Dumeta, Gerardo, Chiva, Chivena, Midemana, the Basheba, Chadi, Chirage, Ma Meba, Teata, Gade, Gade, Paragade, Parasanga, Sheribu, Janju, Samba, Samba, Jimbo, the Dachir, Samba, Samola, Lava, Chao, Tene, Jumbi, Tingin, Tele, Sende, Janju, Samba, Samba, Jimbo, Bava, Cheres, Onjula, Leso, Jawa, Chene, Leso, Dijibu, Tete, Tete. Sidarajuji, Temba, Shindo, Shirage, Paro, Jimbo, Samola, Cheva, Shishapana, Jesu, Giram, Jumbi, Cheka, Sedan, Temba, Shereta, Deboda, Janju, Samba, Samba, Jimbo, Bava, Cheres, Onjula, Tamjida, Kuru, Dada, Lada, Mida, Ama, Sidera, de Jumde, Deji, Sumbala, Mamba,
Page 11. Thus I have heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Raskri on Vulture's Peak, together with the great assembly of monks and bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One was totally absorbed in the concentration that examines all phenomena, called profound illumination. And at the same time, the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, was engaged in the profound practice of the wisdom gone beyond, analyzing the 5 aggregates by nature. Then, through the inspiration of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra spoke to the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, how should those of good family learn who wish to follow the profound practice of the wisdom gone beyond? Thus he spoke, and the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, replied to the Venerable Shariputra, saying, O Shariputra, whatever son or daughter of good family wishes to follow the profound practice of the wisdom gone beyond, should look at it like this, analyzing the five aggregates by nature empty. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, karmic formations, and consciousness are all empty. Therefore, Shariputra, all phenomena are empty without characteristics. They are unborn and unceasing. They are neither impure nor free from impurity. They neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no karmic formation, no consciousness. There is no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. There are no spheres of the eyes, up to no spheres of the mind. There are none of these all the way up to the sphere of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance, nor is there destruction of ignorance. There are none of these all the way up to there is no old age and death, nor is there destruction of old age and death. Thus there is no suffering, no cause of suffering, no cessation of suffering, and no path. There is no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because there is no attainment, all bodhisattvas hold to the wisdom gone beyond, and because there is no obscurity of mind, they have no fear. Passing utterly beyond falsity, they reach beyond the bounds of sorrow. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times, by relying on the wisdom gone beyond, fully and clearly awaken to unsurpassed, most perfect and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the wisdom gone beyond, the mantra of great insight, the unequaled and unsurpassed mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as the truth, for there is no deception. The mantra of the wisdom gone beyond is proclaimed. O Shariputra, and this is how a Bodhisattva Mahasattva should learn the profound wisdom gone beyond. Then the Blessed One arose from that concentration and praised the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, very good, O son of good family. It is exactly like that. The profound wisdom gone beyond should be practiced exactly as you have said, and then the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Shariputra, the noble Avalokiteshvara, the whole gathering, and the world with its gods, men and anti-gods and spirits, their hearts full of joy, praise the words of the Blessed One, so in the noble discourse on the essence of the wisdom gone beyond.
Lamrim Lamrim Yamin Chela, Anita Toma, Kulung, somewhat quite Shira Chenmo Chati Yores, Kulung, Lamrim Yamin Chela, never Kulung. Yavuch never in any Lamrim Yamin Chen, Togo Yulekia, a little got on with the Tangamara as much.
And today is our Sunday class on the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. In order for our practice to be involved in the great treatise, it is necessary that we first establish the proper intention. This is imperative, the proper intention. And the imperative intention that allows for practice of the great treatise is the first doorway to the opening of realization in one's continuum.
Oh, Sunday, you can't get a common method that Chuluchi Chan Shigi you by using but none was using what your magic never catching book. Your magic don't have to music they do Java Chenmo Yuba. They do get that, and they visit Digi Suzuki. Kidu Yamyo, Kibu that the Bukarin Yuba in a young Sangamagi Cheve leg tributa. And it's a chimana, Rang Tidu, and they you made it settle rally or the day Namsha. Any catching in Sumbi or else.
In the context of teachings of the Buddha Dharma, past lives, innumerable, and future lives to come are the essential assumption that underlies our understanding of present experience. Our present experience of satisfaction and dissatisfaction is predetermined by our behavior in past lives, And our future, too, is determined by our behavior in this life. And so this is essential view in the Buddha Dharma.
수수기 미세나기 대두가 강에 대둘라 삼로스탄 말아도 코유기 지조 잠불링 내단기 강에다 틱 대두가 대둘라 삼로스탄 어디 삼로스탄도 아니 말아도라다 직 마디바다 니즈디기 삼로스탄 유도 대대기 동에도 어디 가서 다른 미지디 지고는 양조한테 말았어 통마매 받는 장가매 방고 말은 양차 동에 대대지 양차래 동에 대대지 양차 매세하게 가서라
Now consider hardship, discontent, travails in life generally. Any hardship that we know of, and more generally speaking, the hardships and disasters of society in general. Consider these and recognize that all of them are determined in part by innumerable past lives, and there's no sharp division between that which occurred in the past and that which is experienced now.
아니 개가 나지 동에 고알 들어버렸어. 아니 내가 개가 있는 내가 동에 텔레망아 열어서 동에 디가지 녀기 디가지 수수수기 지금 라와치는 삼로 땅는 내가 제일 고급도 여 말했어. 어디서 그랬어?
And so it is that it can't be said this experience is done, nor that which is to come is measurable and under our control. Instead, it is the case that which is to come is in a sense not in our control. Once we are involuntarily reborn again into samsara, inevitably birth, aging, sickness, and death ensue and must be experienced. And so the moment that rebirth is taken again in samsara, there is all the more suffering that we experience, and we have no independent control. Now that leaves for us the consideration of what exactly is to be done now when we consider that we wish to avoid dissatisfaction and discontent, we wish to experience contentment. What then is required in order to assure this? There is a method and a means for eliminating dissatisfaction and discontent, both for ourselves and for others. And so we must preoccupy ourselves or concentrate our energies in this life with those ends. In short, then what is to be done is production or birth in the first case. Birth into samsara must be prevented. With the prevention of birth into samsara again, with that prevention of birth into samsara, then aging and sickness and death, all which follow birth, will not be experienced. And so primarily we must concern ourselves with preventing birth in samsara.
지금 치워도 졸라 치료 내나다 매마다 나도 좀 받게 내는 슈루도 쉬어제 다 답시제 다 이벌 해서 그렇지.
There are these two means then. First, to prevent birth, rather aging, sickness, and death, and those sufferings, prevent birth in the first case, birth into samsara. Only then with the end of embodiment in samsara is it assured that aging, sickness, and death will not follow. So that is the first means. The second means is, though reborn into samsara, we may lessen the discomfort of sickness and lessen the distress of death. This is the second means available to us.
Oh, yeah, so course, there is about the Chenmo, the Tarim, some of the actually Yamas, course, it is on Subudi, and the Rana Louis Leba is not the quality of a Simjin Kandiji in a Korangi, Louis Lang, the only quality of a secure resonance.
Don't think of samsara as something vast but distant from us. Samsara is the present body with its appropriated aggregates. When the aggregates of the body have been appropriated and taken up, then samsara has been taken up.
Oh, yeah, that today you do that call a kill Malay, that have you call a Chenmo, Tapshi sing that kind of sugar is not that. That on the church is that was me of sugar, Sambasan with sugar, tick sugar, church sugar, say that you send it. I am you not doing young women, or call a killing man, that teach you any quality going to tattoo at it now, call it Tarna you day you, but all the songs to what God is.
In order to avoid taking up embodiment in samsara, in the first case, what method, what means is available to us? The practice of the Dharma is. And the practice of the Dharma involves goodness and kindness and consideration. And the reason for doing these things is to avoid unwanted suffering and to avoid compulsory embodiment in samsara. So in the first case, we look to samsara and find its faults, and then look to liberation and find its good qualities.
Oh, yes, I take the Tobia, Tarbadilla, and a round chibu, Tarba Tobia, Tundu, Obnon Cheni, Tarba Tobia chick, and a round Tundu, Maimba Randa, Sanjay Tanji, Tarba Tobia, Tundu, Lama Loviag, Lama Tarba Toba Cheva, Eo, Resonus.
Within liberation generally, there are two forms. There is liberation of oneself personally, and then there is liberation of both oneself and others. There are these two forms of liberation.
Oh, yeah, Ranchibu, Tarba Tobia, Tundu, Lama Tarba Topsona, Timing Tarba Tobares, Timing, Lama Lovare, Timing on Tarba Tobares. That rang and Tiber Rangi Mata, Yen, that in it, Sanjay Tamjil, Yoa Mebas in the Tarba Gobano, Goya, Lama Love. And then Sanjay Goma Topsona, and it take what Chimbu with Tarba Tobares.
Of these two forms of liberation, the first, which is selfish in interest, strives for only personal liberation and is the liberation of the foundation vehicle. The second form of liberation is a liberation that takes as its object sentient beings, our mother sentient beings, our friends and relative sentient beings, and all sentient beings entirely, and commits oneself personally to the achievement of Buddhahood in order to establish sentient beings in Buddhahood, and that is the Mahayana liberation.
세상다 혼이 이거 탈바토바 지바로 이내 개발도 가래서나 랑 지부지도 탈바토바 이나 아니 랑이 연대 차상 랑 토비어 말 랑이 연대 있는 차상 토비어 말에 방자 있는 차상 방여 말했어. 다 티바 침부고 탈바토바 이나 랑 연대 타다 연대 찌개 말레바 타다 토바래 아니 그 찌개 말레바 타다 방과 차바래서 양yor라 고야기 킨다 연대 여 말에서 티바 침부사 탈바토나
Distinguishing one form of liberation from the other may be done by identifying the liberation of the foundation vehicle as only the near achievement of all good qualities and the near abandonment of all that is to be abandoned. With liberation in the foundation vehicle, not all qualities are achieved personally, and not all that is to be abandoned is entirely abandoned. However, in the Mahayana liberation, with liberation achieved there, all conceivable good qualities are achieved, and all that is to be abandoned is abandoned.
Oh yeah, that 간다를 빼려고지 샤바이나 니네 말한도 이 가족들의 파로도 로고 이어봐이나 아니 대바 친구가 달바 통이디 당부 니네 고중에 그렇게 탐말래 봐도 그런 찍치네 그 가족 파로도 내봐 제발해서 나 팀에게 달바 통이디 거기 간다 야존의 파치야 제가들 대 아니 양파 제가들 만들어지 대리도 어디도 간다 로에 간가 파 로고 요때 이네 제가들 대대도 어디도 차발 해서
To illustrate this by way of an example, imagine wishing to travel to the far shore of a great ocean. In the Mahayana, following the Mahayana liberation, one embarks to the far shore and doesn't finish sailing until one has reached the far shore. However, in the foundation vehicle, one wishes to achieve the far shore, to pass to the far shore, but halfway across the ocean pauses and waits, though the rest of the journey remains ahead.
Oh, yeah, that thing on the deck has another church, Lapal, Lobson Chadi, Church and Lamrim, Lamrim, Lamjit Bas. That Kari Lamjit Bas, not Tiba Chimbu, Sanjig Salad, Taba Tobiag, that's Lamla Drag, Lamjit Bas, La we are attained to Madame on the Tiba Chimbu Church. Zindadi Tiba Chimbu Zindacha, the Yoris, Zeta, Diana Tiba Chimbu Pejare, Tamarando Lomnia Chienzo in it, Tiba Chimbu, Lobon Chiku, you do. Tiba Chimbu Church Chava, the Tiba Chimbu Kansa Chavala, that Pulungdi, Tambus. Okay, Gonyegi made the Mazuna Pulungdi. And any Tiba Chimbu Pulung Church to what you call it.
The great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment that we have in our hand now describes the stages of which particular path? The Mahayana path. It is the Mahayana path to liberation. Now that makes this present class a class in the Mahayana. It means too that the students here are meditators in the Mahayana tradition. And in order for a practitioner to be a Mahayanist, in order for the Dharma to be Mahayana Dharma, both require the proper intention.
That is some local Sarangi Dagis, Masamji Tamji Kutundu. Ani Simji Tamji Dunele Tarba, Dewa Tada, Dema, Sanji Yukoman, Tobar Chegi, Tobar Chao, Yamba, Kulung Tamuta, Chanju Sim, the Rich Simba Chorus. And they tober Chabalata, and it's a Lamna, Yula Labore, Labola, Shebola, Tubata, Samba, Oba chair to the Guguyore, Tichola, Toma Tuba, Guguyore, Chazatama, to teach you to drink Tuba chair to the E, and Yagi to the church and Ruchamunyadi, and the Rangi Momo San, Samjetam Sanji, Sal, one Tuber service to the Richi to teach you to a name. Tuba Chigi and turn some Gomotula Chigi, Sunday can do the same Simba the Rich God has one.
What is the thought process then that establishes the proper intention in order for the practice of listening to be the Mahayana practice of listening? It is the commitment, it is the intention to establish all sentient beings, all mother vulnerable beings in Buddhahood, and to achieve Buddhahood oneself in order to bring about this end, in order to separate sentient beings from suffering, in order to allow them to experience all forms of contentment. And in order to do this, in order for this commitment to be brought off, one must listen, one must contemplate, and one must meditate. And so first of all, one must listen. And so our present concern is listening, how to listen. And the motivation is in order to establish all mother sentient beings in Buddhahood and to achieve Buddhahood ourselves with this end in mind, I attend to the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, listening and following this listening with contemplation and ultimately with meditation.
That's in the Hamudi Turba, you did Turba vacation for it, Turba the manner, Sambada Gombagi, Yula Gash, that's it. Chazan Turba the kitchen for it. Chazan Turba Dean, Turba Neto songs and the word that Turba Neto songs do, and then Turba töbe tönde 아니 랑라 귤레 자규요바 tö는 삼규요바 삼는 곰주 베랑게 또봐야 자나 또봐게 요바 차발라 또봐게 요바 차오라스 차발라 아니 tö바데 균이 돌아 만들어 버스 어디치들라 아니 네 최니 예배 풀라 아니 다 가진 sabje 예 대와 개인 교육에 숨봉 왔다 되게 되시 툭때 봐서 어디 담내도 거래서
In the first case, listening is imperative, for without the practice of listening, it cannot be followed with contemplation, nor followed by meditation. The practice of listening must be complete and consummate in order for contemplation that follows and meditation that follows that to give rise to realization. So it is essential that the practice of listening not be squandered, not be misused. And so we concern ourselves here with the proper way of listening, which is described in the great treatise on the stages of the path through the metaphor of eliminating the 3 faults of the vessel, as well as developing the 6 discriminations or the 6 ideas.
Oh, yeah, that indeed, Tunji, no, you can't someday, Yahosh Mabana, and Chu Kashin, Chu Mato Chadwars, Kashin Chu Toyo, the Jamakun, Pemato the Chadwars, and Kashin Chu Tuba, the Rangi Gula Yameto, coming to them, and Pemato the Chadwars, and they no, you can't someday. Betty, I was yet, and that's some time, and you can't soon down, Cherry Tone, and the Chu Yamba Juma. 아니 제 년바데 뒤주토라 만도 랑기 줄로 또 와게 요바 미션라야 바 팬도 전에 시야요 자산 요구를 해서
Without abandoning the 3 faults of the vessel, the purpose of listening will not be achieved. That is, one may listen, but the meaning of the listening won't be retained. Or one will retain the meaning of the listening, but because of contaminated intention, one will misuse the meaning, and it won't be of benefit to the mind. And so for this reason, it is essential to listen, having abandoned the 3 faults of the vessel. And when this is done, then realization may be gained, and benefits may be experienced both by ourselves and by others.
Oh, that's it. To see to them was that going some pound in your day, and a rangy July. Toba you do care, and a turbo turned around the same to Jartua. Toyo did on some time in Kaga mine was still Jartua and dollar dushi to the Chenmo your response.
With the abandonment of the 3 faults of the vessel, one may follow these with 6 ideas, and through the application of these 6 particular ideas, realization may be quickly developed, and one may quickly apply the significance and meaning of the teaching to oneself personally. And so it is essential that one not separate the teaching from oneself, but apply the teaching to oneself.
What is it? That in yet to shit took none of the Rangla Neve to shit. And it's sure made it to shit. And then Chenmo, remember Quebec to shit. And then Yamzolan was net service to shit. And the decision was a two tablet to shit, and it showed you 3D. Ring to never to shit, do shit 2 years banana that to shit. Tamu. And then Rangla Neve to shit, because the shit are sure made it to shit, but in Rosar. That's sure she remember Quebec to shit there because the shit are as well.
These 6 ideas are to think of yourself as a sick person, to think of the instructor as a doctor, to think of the instructor's explication as medicine, to think of earnest practice as a way to cure your disease, to think of the Tathagatas as excellent beings, and to wish that the teachings will endure for a long time. The first, thinking of yourself as a sick person, and the second, thinking of the instructor as a doctor, and the third, thinking of the instructor's explication as the treatment. These 3 we have completed.
Oh, that do shit took the Kanga Kever Chevala, do shit Tangbudi, Minji board, do shit Tangbudi, Yuba Yina, do shit Chimazo, and then some of the Ramsan, you say Tong Tuya yours. 두시 당보디 내가랑 내백 두시 생도랑 내백 두시 생디 간당아 내바면 삼다 아니 직 바게 직내 내게 날당도 양글 뭘 쳐봐지 마주나 아니 라랑 내백 두시디 마이케버도 차거든 데 마이케버이는 두시 제마도 이게 남산 네 삼루나 코르투고 말해서
The first idea is essential. With the first idea comprehended, the subsequent 5 will naturally follow. So it's essential that one comprehend the first idea, which is that each person is sick. We are sick. Instead of responding, I'm not sick actually, which is only an expression of not understanding how it is you're sick, one must comprehend that in fact they are sick. Without this comprehension that we are sick, the other 5 ideas won't naturally follow, but with the comprehension they will.
Oh, yes. 세상다랑라 네베 뒤시 생이 빼는 아주 단단하랑절라 수불라 즉 룰라 즉 세리게바 저다 즉 마대야다 아니 셈라 마기바 유아들 모두 뒤중고 소외나게 나자데 칠로 하나들 즉 체다 아니 수수 마기바다 룰 마대야 차가 나자도 되게 세르디다 단단한 저기 대시게 아니 낭셈 되게 니모게 나자데 대시게 니부디 수수 단단히 빼들라 라네 되는데 고아지해로 와서 오늘 삼루나로 초알레바이나 되지 단단한 저 시체고 돈에 지금 니모 돈에 아주 셈나로 나자다야다 즉 버리 동에 무트는 용어 진짜로 삼루마 10 땅와이나 아니 뒤도 오늘 내바다 내바 이미 뒤식게 고야다 되게 세르즈 좀 첨부 이어봐 또 오늘 다 수술 단다 그 나자다 마소나 나자 님과제 세르 첨부에서 솔구여 말에 맞도 지금 때문에 다들 류 마데발레 세르체 여러 소모스
When we consider the body and its pains, its discomforts, we think of the feeling of discomfort, the pain that we feel when we meet with some condition that causes pain. So we are aware of conditions that inflict pain physically. Now we have to liken the conditions and the causes that cause pain physically to the mental afflictions, metaphorically, in order to get the feeling that mental afflictions inflict pain upon us. In order to really comprehend this, we have to recognize that the pains, the searing pain of mental afflictions is a form of pain inflicted by the mental afflictions, and that in fact, this form of pain, this form of discomfort is much greater than physical pain.
아니 니모고 두주고 지금 도당도 데이스시야 삼로나로 초알레바체 아니 지금 알아도 지조 수수비 대두고 삼로 땅용도 단단한 주고 셈다 지금 마이기바다 룰을 마대 영화 디기리 강가 강더 바게 니모디디 온게 연구를 마도 니모디디 매바이나 룰을 마대에다 셈다 마이기바 체기 영화 용사기 보고라 요 말해서
Now, as we apply this to the path, as we practice the path, and consider the presentation of the mental afflictions, in order to get a sense and a feeling of the mental afflictions, look to society as a whole, and consider the various forms of mental and physical suffering experienced generally, and recognize that all of those discontents and those pains arise from mental afflictions in the first case. Without the mental afflictions in that first instance, none of the discontents and none of the pains of society would follow.
Oh, yeah, around the summer, that's 6 weeks. Some Matan Tabaniju Kagaro, some Tang Savagella, and it Lugina Zaineta, Semdi Gange Ineta, and it's exchanging children around the Soena, Dodge and children, so it never you were the Significant Chilo in Watawata, and it's around Mikey was on that Chilo was a game, Mario, we were charging what was Teddy, that condition was Tena, and then Papa Party, you want to, and you want the Papa Teddy, Suzu, you want to do the Corrigan, Tamati, Susu, Susu, Najumi, Susu, Terama, Corrigan, but Tap Corris Gabney. Te on the Suzu, you more than 2 days, and you more the students soon on the same dinner. Same Samlotanda Mashiba, Mombati, Ongi Yunguva, or the Data and the Corrigan, 아니 대니 근데 제 줄이요나 아니 수수대 거여서 랑sem나로 유모디 온 디기 온게 연구요 아니 니모디 파 매버 스웨자는 네바요 말에 자요 말 개고 버차다 매버 스웨자래요 소모지.
Now, it's an entirely different matter if one doesn't give this the thought it requires, in which case the suffering of body and mind one will be able to attribute entirely to external conditions. But when one actually investigates how discontent and pain arises, one looks to the conditions that seem external, but ultimately, as one follows the trail of causes, one will arrive ultimately inwardly, recognizing that the mental afflictions are, for each person, the contributing factor that causes distress, generally speaking. And so this all depends upon the proper way of thinking in the first case, recognizing that ignorance, that all are under the sway of ignorance, and that this causes the mental afflictions, which we seem to experience only externally, or rather cause hardship seemingly external in its cause, though, however, with proper investigation, we find that it is the mental afflictions in each person that gives rise to all forms of discontent and hardship. And then when mental afflictions are eliminated, the very source for distress generally is removed.
라바 배 정무 잡아로지 라바 차는 라바 차기도 왔어. 대나신 안아도 니모 되게 왕게 아니 지로 간가 나 통을 만도 수술 라바 멜파 말하는 맥이 치기 말에 담을라 말은 수차기 말와 제가 대나신 간다 니모세도 간다 타마데 투는 수술이 니모 토나네 아 치라 배 내가 용야다 지바 니모께 지로 동에 용야 찾아 아니 간다서랑 셈이 니모 되게 왕 소요샤버지를 해서
Kanske ani metsigne, jag menar ani 장어랭네 ani 캬캬거든.
med lagwa desla lagwa de mel pamatuna meg tutsigma
로.
장문단 차기와 어디나시다 강가 랑기 대둑 차단 랑기 셈기 최당 야고 차나 아니 니모 주 간다 니모 그런 파 마게나 아니 치료 주 중에 수내 돌아요 말해서 뭐 배도 되는 잘son
Take, for instance, when you reach out with your hand and raise a flame, you'll be burned. Or when you reach out and touch something cold, your hand will be chilled. It isn't that it is a necessary experience of the pain of burning or the pain of freezing. It's rather that something compelled you to do that in the first case. Now, without the mental afflictions compelling action that causes pain to be inflicted seemingly by an external source, without the mental afflictions causing that, no harm would come. And so this is just a metaphor, but with the proper adjustment of one's mentality, the seeming external sources of discontent and pain will be eliminated.
개체뭐 이뭐 뭐셔나 아니 다수수의 추기 냠내지 지도자 아니 소디 삼루 초와디 뒤식이 예배 토네 아니 냠내지야 고주야 아니 펜도치 뭐 여러서.
So this first idea, when one comprehends it, when it is compelling and felt to be compelling, when it gives rise to a feeling that in fact we are sick, that is the beginning of practice, actually.
Oh yeah, that is never invited motion, never invited that to see the level in any manage that members of Yobati, any that so I'm legal.
With that first comprehension of oneself as actually sick, the following idea that a treatment is required and that a physician would be required follows naturally.
Oh, oh yeah, that man amji. That man amji yoba ina youngs man that yabu yoba the amji yabu yoba man yoba amji yoba chasan yoba ina yang. 아니 내디 오늘 자고도 딱 가르고서 개치셔도 맨 고구로 와서.
Now you have you have a treatment and you have a physician. These you have, both you have, the physician, the treatment. But in order for the recovery to really occur, that treatment, that medication must be correct.
Oh, yeah, that is that dushi shiva ne den yamzu lamala ne tsube dushi singedi. Oh, that bed shigi yores.
So with that, the fourth idea, earnest practice as the way to cure your disease. This has to do with making the treatment correct.
Oh, yeah, that never that penny one the careta, penny one that kadu nazadi, but never so to what made the was. That made the imba the hako, that made the round tobache. And member a tobache, and around the man there, Sulne, man there, Mangole, Kazuko Bale, and in Masevas in Devaina, and maybe penguin to make penguin those Lani Devaina, and then no dream Sabina, that's conduct member the man, and he taking me to center, the way your mares much.
The efficacy of the medication, the efficacy of the treatment, once one has recognized that a treatment, a course of treatment is required, requires using that treatment correctly. So one has a prescription and one has a physician, and one has been given all that they need in terms of the prescription. They have the medication and they have the advice of the doctor. They have those things, but then they don't actually take the medicine. If this were to happen, and then that person were to complain, the doctor didn't prescribe the proper medication, or the medication was incorrect, this would be absurd.
Oh, yeah, Tinashi member any social Dichigo Mares, London Cheva in the Tia Manyamache, and the man there Masevich in Devaina, and it never Suzuki that nor a member that make Norio Marwas, Betty Nashing, and it member man Java, member Keva the Java, and the Suzuki Lama Gavishini, or the Zuga Lamte Bate, and then Betty Nashan and some town or the
When the physician says, take this, do this, gives advice, and then gives a prescription to the patient, and then the patient doesn't follow the advice and doesn't take the prescription, it's the patient's fault when they don't recover. So in this same spirit, the prescription is the Dharma and the physician is the teacher. So apply the same lesson to these.
Oh, yeah, that was Page Kaduro Lavena. Never get man that Java thing on the Chokunjo chat, or that's Chokunjo. That Chokunjo was Chokunjo to Zanamazuta. Pena Chokunjo is on the Chupung, Jaroina. That Jidan Chokunjo, so there's a man around the Yams and Lagi. Tony Tope, Tony Kadet, Tunge Pangbe Pangbatetan, Tunge Pongi, Lami or one. This Chokunjo Motorwa. That the Swenjig around the Jegu, which Chosham Taldo, the Jumon can you pedwa, the Jumon thing you ped or around the Chokunjo, Bula Gay, tap, and Chubung saying, Choose it up on the Buddhist in Jora, or the rest on
Each person recognizes themselves as sick and then knows to rely upon a course of treatment, a prescription, and that prescription is metaphorically, the Dharma is likened to a prescription. And the Dharma that is the Dharma of practice that occurs on the path of the mind, realization of emptiness, the thorough abandonment of that which is to be abandoned. These are the Dharma gem. So too are the scriptural Dharma of the word of the Buddha and the commentaries on the word of the Buddha as they are here.
제얘기 아니 암지다 보고 어디 원래 저거래 뭐신 저거래 손으로지.
And the dharma, that prescription, when it is given by an individual, that person giving the prescription of the dharma, the Buddha, the Bodhisattvas, the spiritual mentor, they are giving the prescription, and so one ought to identify the individual providing this prescription of the dharma as a physician.
Oh yeah, 다지 빼디 매 망보라바 쳐다보다 다디 파게 계기 신설 가졌다 랑기 내 모시디 가르스나 하나도 내 때문에디 뉴모 바티게 먼저 내디게로 왔다 내디게 10월 채바디 근데 수위치 그랬으나 매디 적으로 하지 매가 쓰디 지역군조 다 지역군조디 다 지역군조 뭐서 하나도라 야마 팬이지 이게 지역군조디 아니 가르쳐 그랬으나 다랑게 동반이 또베 이시디 니모디게 파 매바서 니모디게 매바서게 방법 고된다 대화주로 디 가도 줄에 깨버 제바인자 아니 깨버 제나 아니 랑게다 유기 니모디게 매바 차그래 니모디게 매바 차도 아니 내다 치네 나게 차상 다 매바서 차버래 아니 드디어 손대다 대화 동해생이 요 매바 차그와 제단 고 최군조디 아니 가다 방제라 니무치 얘기 아니 동반이 또베 이시대당 이시대기 빵배 아니 빵바 고den이요 어디 다랑 감 추궁 디나로스 디숭샤르 딜러 터슴 제랑 냠랑 딜러되네 아니 남들이 귤레께 버체스나 아니 그다 강사라니 가르자래 군조 차라 소한 빈두군조 추 귤레수 귤레 가르께래 추 군조 깨래 강사디 귤레 추 군조 또바께서나 강사디 빈두군조 차를 해서로지
Then, by way of this example, the physician, the teacher, the spiritual mentor provides all the dharma, the prescription necessary. And then the essence of the illness, the very nature of the illness is the mental afflictions. And the prescription is to pacify the mental afflictions. And that which pacifies the mental afflictions and is like a prescription is the Dharma gem. And its efficaciousness is based upon that it conduces to the wisdom realizing emptiness. With the wisdom realizing emptiness, the mental afflictions are eliminated. And with the elimination of the mental afflictions, nirodha, cessation, is achieved that occurs on a person's continuum, in a person's mind. With the mental afflictions eliminated, external and internal causes of discontent will be absent, suffering will be absent, and this is the way in which the Dharma is the antidote, and the Dharma that is the antidote is specifically the wisdom realizing emptiness and nirodha, the cessation. Through the scripture of the Dharma, which one may listen to, and through listening, which may arise in one's own continuum, that which arises in one's continuum based upon scriptural listening and study is that which creates the Sangha, the individual who has the realization of the Dharma in their mind is the Sangha.
Oh yes, 제가 근데 이래서마다 간다를 전화 도도를 봐. 고대워지 쉬바이나 나 랑기다 바게 내들레 교벌 제약이 아니 최군조 대라는 토요래 다 되니기 계획신에 대해랑 토요래 다 이내 랑기 냠수 말라마이나 아니 니모디 가지 시기 말에 나다되기 시기 말에 모든 나다 영어되기로 와서다 랑기 냠수 랑고래 퇴바디 삼중비 시럽게 맞제버체는 냠수 양양 체는 냠수랑 아니 랑기줄 또바 계속나 아니 내 차만 쉬어도 용으로 와서 어디서
So in short, to make this understandable, comprehending oneself to be sick and recognizing that one wishes to recover from the illness, and then recognizing that one has the Dharma, one has achieved this Dharma in the sense that one has learned of it. And one may also recognize that one has a physician in the person of the spiritual mentor. So the Dharma is present, the spiritual mentor is present. But without practice, failing to practice, the mental afflictions will never be eliminated. Failing to practice, despite the other conditions, the mental afflictions will remain. Thus, practice is essential. That means to listen to the teaching and then to remember the teaching. And remembering the teaching, implement the teaching. And through the implementation of what one has listened to and what one has heard, one may develop realization.
Oh yeah, that's the imba any something to things in Kebula Sunya, to things in Kebuna. Any that under Georgian things in Kebole, Yanda and the tea, member Kebati, the Georgian. Mendi tangwa kiwa meji na mendi sangshi pemba dela de nawa chowa yuwe mendi tung ne membe male neji male de neba tingi kini nyeba yi tishi temba dilu tenda topda samde chunga yi gomba nani chumba chabi yuwe meji tena neba pi kondi duwa si sabji shiba di kanga dera duwa o dishi ma kyoro shi kum dishi nyeso tingi dishi ma kyoro shi.
Now, the scriptural support for this is found in the King of Concentration Sutras on page 60. Some people are ill, their bodies tormented. For many years, there is not even temporary relief. Afflicted with illness for a very long time, they seek a doctor in search of a cure. Searching about again and again, they at last find a physician with skill and knowledge. Treating the patients with compassion, the doctor gives medicine, saying, "Here, take this. This medicine is plentiful, good, and valuable. It will cure the illness, but the patients do not take it. This is not a shortcoming of the doctor, nor the fault of the medicine. It is just the fault of those who are ill. Likewise, after you have left the householder's life for the sake of the teachings, and have come to know the powers, meditative stabilizations, and faculties, how can you attain nirvana without making effort at meditation, and effort at what is right?"
On
the page 61, I have explained this very good teaching, yet if you, having heard it, do not practice correctly, then just like a sick person holding on to a bag of medicine, your illness cannot be cured.
And Kirangi Yamzu Malana Malan do meadow, many lapsavi, and then Nesa, men, Tetsavi, men, the tools game, Modrich, Tetsavi is, and then name Machina Malan, Yanga meadow, someday the Pransons are Atina Chibares.
So, with that, the Buddha has said, I have given you the means to recover. I have given you a prescription that you may take. If you do not take the prescription, and you do not recover, it's not my fault. It's on you. I have introduced you to the means for recovery, and now it is your responsibility.
Menji lava samji jan ane nebatala penju rams or the city takanda to dordu song dog other ragi lugi lugi kadar lugi to me the sim kange the several chebala malamna and it exam better law and shade in a pengi mares when a me mango yoga the me yapo yoga me and it pengi yoga to teblo and it Suzuki Yamne Maji was a tebji below then. And Nazar Shiva Pengi Maros, men Nazar Shiva Cheval, men Sauda, what Nashim Majina, Dungi Shigimaris, or the Pet Janis, Junjunas, or the other response.
Then this is followed by an excerpt from Shantideva's engaging in the Bodhisattva's deeds. Physically, put these instructions into practice. What will be accomplished by mere talk? Will sick persons be helped by merely reading a medical treatise? So then, in short, Shantideva says, discontents, mental discontents, physical pain, these things may be eliminated. You have the means for eliminating them. You have practices for eliminating them. It's as though you have the prescription, you have the medication, you have all that you need, and it's effective. However, you don't take it. So if you just read about means for pacifying suffering, but you don't ever implement those means for pacifying suffering, then suffering will not be pacified in the end.
소지다 간다 던다도 저름지 가르침 샤워에서는 퇴바치고 퇴바도 가르쳐는 퇴베 된디라는 게 시에버 예버 시에버 시에버스 아니 퇴는 시에버 시에버 고바디 아니 가르쳐 퇴바라는 게 퇴베기 된다 뛴지 아니 냠내 제투바디 아니 퇴바치베 고바레스 어디서 봐서 간다다 수수기 다무 퇴고 퇴 차도자 먹고 제 마주와 저랑 그 세바는 년 아니 그 수수기 뒤져다 수수 온보다 뛰지네 아니 냠내 배직이 숨전에 가는 찍모도 맞으면 배 내버도 제투가 chen 근데 제바 있나 아니 퇴바 제부디 아니 그바레스 어디서 숨어라서
In short, Tsongkhapa follows this saying, therefore earnest practice in the statement, think of earnest practice as what clears away the illness of the afflictions. Earnest practice is required. The earnest practice here is the practice of listening. We must listen, for what we listen to has a meaning which we may ascertain. When we comprehend the meaning of that which we have listened to, then with practice then, when we conjoin our practice to the meaning of that which we have listened to, what follows will be the very purpose of listening in the first place. The very purpose of listening in the first place is to implement or to apply that which may be learned from listening. So one listens and then strives not to forget what they have heard and to bear in mind at all times what they have heard and to apply what they have heard.
야, 다 된대 이러자마자 간다라 말하는 다 밖에 수족이 최퇴배 되는데 랑이 냠서 라마 제가 돼야 아니 말하는 내 찍이 되는데 많이 봤다 가다 말하는 빼나 내게 제네도다 빼나서다 직 나서 두자 캔슬도 온다 그나 되바이나 아니 맨 살직선에 뱅기 말어 왔어 그래서 맨디 무트니 사고야 답에 유르부 사고야 망고 사고야 요 디나시 말하는 유모되기디 아니 배 내게 나는 배내 잡쟁이디 이디 아니 그 맨디 배 유싱이 된 거다 규도 뒤뒤 된 거다 유르부 된 거야디 아니 배도 뒤도 디나시 삼다는 이랑이 냠내디 지금 예마직도 나와직 근데 많이 봐배 윤투니 로투니 난 거야디 아니 그내 나타고도 시부고 유나 맨디 배 유르부 된 거다 망고 된 거요 디나시 찍바래 소모
The meaning of the Dharma that one learns through listening must be constantly, continuously, and for an extended period applied. If one has leprosy or cancer, the treatment will be an ongoing treatment that one follows for a long time. And similarly, with the sickness of the mental afflictions, one treats the mental afflictions continuously over an extended period, taking the medicine again and again and again, not just for a day or for a month or for a year, but year after year after year, for it is a very desperate disease and requires long-term treatment.
Lamrim do nyamne chidu samba ani so ta kandar thebe thambo theba degaran theba chidu ne ani kulung da nyamne chigi gochu tu gores ani theba chidu samba ani ani theba rang samotang chi ani jik suzu pe shejagi kanda yende pagi yende namrang do jila samotang de chen ani theba che thanda de khagores cheda ta kandar lamrim theba che do 랑이 셈다 람리 이부디 버루로 동바 매봐 셈다 셈 람리디 주 셈나는 줄로 셈디가 아니 람리디 배주도 가다 말아도 미기 dobje sawa na dobje sa ni na lo ju de su du ni ji mi da de ro de de pa sa ma su ka de ju de su len wo la de na xin chen da lamri nyam ne ji de ani da mo thyo ba ji ge thyo be thyo de ge de sam ju ge sha ra be che ba che ani ya ju le ke ba che de ka da ba ge nyam ne de da sem ni bu de ka du ni nyam do go ra a sem de da nyam ne ni bu de bo tong ba yu na ani da 아니 람링 펴바치고 있으면 마페 바차이 냥가시라 요래서 뭐지
So the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, as we practice it, I take it as an example, and it has many stages. These stages begin with the practice of listening itself, and then may be followed with the practice of establishing the right intention and the other practices that it describes. It is listening itself that must be attended to first in and of itself, as a practice in and of itself. And one shouldn't listen to detect good qualities in others or evaluate the talent of others. Instead, listening is a practice unto itself in which that which is listened to, the meaning of that which is heard, is meant to be applied directly to one's own mind in such a way that there's no gap, there's no distinguishing what one has heard from what one's mind becomes. And so it is a practice really of digesting and extracting the very essence and digesting it fully so that the essence of what one has heard arises as understanding in the mind. And so the mind and listening, that to which one listens, are indissolubly one. And without this, the benefits of listening will not arise.
퇴배 된디다 아니 샘니부터 자르마토부터 차가 아니 퇴바 가져 체는 샘나 마펜요 아니 그 샘나 마펜도 다도 그 퇴바 지고 되게 샘나 내야 년가시라 요라스 그래서 그 퇴바 직지 니지 숨제 망고 제셔도 아니 강가로 신데 교도시 아니 년에 신데 교도시 샘 돌아 냠내시도 페마도 아니 샘나 니모도 봐 총을 따는 페마도 되게 차와 있나 아니 먼저 람링 세단 들어가 있는 최대쇼스 뭐 높은 제제는 셈 제가 야를 좀 맞아서 두드려야지 내가 지어서 어딜에서는 최대쇼스 그래서 람링 그런 세단을 해서
Now there's a danger when one doesn't apply the lessons that one learns through listening to the mind. The meaning of that which one hears and the mind itself should be brought together such that the lessons apply directly to the mind. If this doesn't occur, then no matter how many times one listens to Dharma teachings, they won't be beneficial. In fact, it may happen that the Dharma may become harmful. For if a person listens again and again, yet doesn't apply the lessons to their own mind, then they become ostensibly knowledgeable, but all of that knowledge doesn't bring about any benefit for the mind. In fact, one has been exposed to the means for pacifying the mental afflictions, but those means are never used and therefore are unavailable for pacifying the mental afflictions. And what we say in the great treatise is that a person has thereby become callous to the Dharma. One has listened again and again and again to the Dharma, yet their situation only worsens.
Tadi manyen churo tat kol malu sagi kodum pel tat donam ramu to wazu tat chala jor ko maadu lu kodum ko lu sa jo ko na lu chago tu jo ko di malu ni ko nyebu cha yo na ko ranja thak de ros 다들 과 말로 라르다 요말 어디나 신진은 알아서 추기 퇴바만 보체 아니 냠내 맞아봐이나 아니 최대수 돼야면 잘 그랬어. 오늘 지나다 람리 프랑의 순간으로 제바이나 배낭 가서 뒤로 가산디 뒤마 가자. 기본 강라기 아니 코랑 미국에 미망 곳에 배줘봐냐 봐 시우 이바이나 양 코랑이 기부 다외기 아니 지 저놈나 때제네 고배 삼바쿠는 제마 쳐바차 저 뒤에 냠내 뭐 시우 차바로 와. 근데 자기도 왔다가도 미쳐봐 예바이나 양 퇴바 제바들랑 냠수 남아있는 쌤 유튜브 어렸어. 퇴바 제바들랑 냠수 말라마체 퇴바 퇴장을 샤샤나 아니 그 쌤이야 네네. 쌤들이 뒤에면 자들이 자 진배들 지나 꼬아도 그냥 배들이 자네. 안 가다 말라마서 되게 숨겨 망고 요래서 숨었어.
An example may be found in the process of tanning leather. Using oils and butters, leather may be tanned, and then when it's flexible, made into coats and garments and bags and things. And that's through the application of butter or oil or something to the leather so that it is made more flexible. But in Tibet, there were travelers who had these bags that you could put butter in. But in the first case, the bag was already stiffened and hard and had become hardened by the butter, but it hadn't been tanned. But once it's stiffened like that, there was no amount of application of butter that could ever tan it again so that it would be flexible. So like that, one may become callous to the Dharma. Instead, in the way that Saudasana, the cannibal who killed all those people, when he met the Bodhisattva prince, and the Bodhisattva prince taught the Dharma to him, though he was originally very ill-mannered, mean-spirited, through listening to the Buddha Dharma, he was pacified. Now some become callous to the Dharma and remain incorrigible, and others, through listening to the Dharma, can pacify their mental afflictions.
가를 따오나 메론 따오와 메론 시 메론 따는 수 동벌의 교회나 장마서 근데 야고도단데 나고 접촉으로 와 대당시 마란족이 딱 간다 밖에 최 람림디 최바 람림디 마란족 밖에 수수의 샘비 교회에 따사게 메론은 시 삼로 땅 메론들을 따는 샘비 접어 지단데 되게 믿으나 요하다 샘비 접어 지단데 야고도나 아주 마음 곰디야 야게 땅 쪽으로 와서 어디나 신체는 냠내 쪽으로 해서
The practice of listening provides us with a mirror. Just as we may look into a mirror and look at our face and find whether it is dirty and needs to be washed or presentable and maybe taken into public or not. When we look into the mirror and we find a spot, we can wash it off. But if we look fine, then we can go out with it. In the same way, the practice of listening is for us a mirror. In the Dharma, we can compare our behavior to that which is found in the Buddha Dharma, described in the Buddha Dharma. And we look to the Buddha Dharma as a mirror. And if we see that our behavior ought to be changed, then we can change it. And if we find that some of our activities are virtuous and constructive, then we continue those. Listening is a mirror for us.
딩도 지난데 중라벨라 중에 여러 제가 다 되게 강가 숨어 보고는 디 최고 다보다 어디 또 좀 되대 좀 되대는 아니 기부 담바이 뭐시 봐 뒤시 거래 송어지.
The fifth idea is of the Tathagatas as excellent beings, and the practices learned through listening are the practices described in 84,000 heaps of the Buddha Dharma, or described, which are also described as the teachings of the three baskets, or also as the teachings found in the 12 forms of teachings of the Tathagatas.
오예 다 된다 도도로 다 뒤시 벌라니 기부 담바이 뭐 뒤시에 아니 가진 제수 텐데 고바데다 된다 나와들에 송어지. 나와데.
And so the fifth idea is of the teachers of the Holy Dharma as themselves holy beings, the Tathagatas.
오예 다디 삼도 이바데라 아니 제랑 다디 가랑도 추 람림이 추 아니 송바보게 수수도 다른 전쟁원도 라마다랑이 유배 최송화돼도 아니 좀 되게 아니 지금 라마다 실업되기 때문에 많이 아니 지금 다 유바도 아니 지금 유바도 되게 두시샤는 연구해야 되는데 아니 남rim나는 송여래 송스.
The second or the third idea, that of the instructor as a doctor, is a recognition that the spiritual mentor, the lineage lama, the individual presenting the teachings, is conveying blessings, and is in this way an emanation.
도시 다 두번 취지수도 릉도 내베 두시했어. 취지 취지다 말한도 냠도 나야게 취기다 직박에 아주 산제기 때바 유르도 내베 주지만은 얘기도 와. 어디 나시 당하나도 냠도 내베 람링기다 또 냠네 제도 배. 아니 비 람링 고랑도 람링 때문에 아마 가디주 강아 지대이 캄난 배 매버 차마도 유르도 내버 제. 데데기 전에 삼로 말람 잡아다 데데 삼로 땅아들 아니 최선으로 매는 뒤시세들에 손으로지.
And the sixth idea, that of the teaching, or that the teaching may endure for a long time, is related to the prayer that we recite, in which we aspire for teachers to remain for a long time and for the teachings to remain. It is an idea and an aspiration such that in the realms, the teachings of the Buddha Dharma never disappear and always remain.
so that porque tuyin anda porque tuyin tushi trup that pajen tushi to samlo tangda do that tudu tega res ani ina that che yindu zamba ani chi lugu chelamda ani jidu chidang kola ani karsu kola kazang azo dege tanda di gebu kanda lugu shesa che diwa digi 제가 디치기 디어 다기 최번에 배수 최지면은 최지면은 시디가 안 되셔서 거라네 다른 당아도 최저밭에 나는 가서는 배디에 숨어 다디 깨럽는 숨도와 다지 최번에 배수 최지면은 멜론 세토나 일라라도 도와지 다니 처를 쳐버 줘서 다디 고랑이 이 최나로나 쉬어야 야 타마타마 기부 다외기 기부 간다라 아니 고랑 간다 차베기 띵이지 오게 뛰니 아니 제가 고랑다 셈을 저번에 받기 보라파 디체로와 신이 아니 최나로나 기랑기 잠시게 달아 쉬요기 최대 말 새로 제스는 고랑이 봐도 저한테 망고 전에 타마된다 최슈로 나서 쉬어디 지금 쉬어표 이래서
With these six conditions present, these six ideas, one may practice properly, one may listen properly. And one's conduct as they listen is described in that verse given by Saudasa, spoken by Saudasa to the Prince Chandra, the Bodhisattva prince, when after all of Saudasa's bad behavior, ultimately he recognized the value of the Dharma, and finally he asked the Bodhisattva prince, Prince Chandra, to describe what he had heard from the Brahman, the eloquent Brahman. And so in that verse, Saudasa says, now that I have seen the faultiness of my ways as though in a mirror, teach the Dharma that you heard to me.
Oh, yes, that is the Quran. Chu Naroda, Tina Jazet Dao, Koran, Karzana, Jazet Dao, Chu Yumbe, Ned, Gurbat, the Koran, Chu that Shiagi, and Tuita, and Koran, the Chu, Yentuya Yubagi, and a Bageta, Dujel, Chu Kadushi, who you met on that, Chu Chogi, you may all to do the Kembe, Hangzan, Koran, that Chu Shiachidoni, that around Chu Yingina, and Kiranda, and this Yamores. And Kiranda, that's the Mave Tenno, Kirang, Ma, Walma, de Jos. The Koran to do some Koran desert card, there's a Koran chart down, they give out our wall Shayarwa. So that desert is Jewija. And it is give out Jumde the Koran, Jumde the Marta, give out our Koran, and the Koran to load Papi, to Koran going to load it, to the thing. And Digana Jaset Awaya Sha, and the Koran Jumde the Kiranda, Chunigina. And the tema they show 6 the two number with the tema they could be 6 and it do a number of cases that's similar and it condo than a number unit super by Shiva Chivers and then guy me that they were thinking Kandara chick chewing with Namju and it's Shiva Jenny nearly a dash or so and then some look at this time was not chewy do you to that the couple of the Chilani that we are shoot over ordinary Chenbe, and do zig to Tuana cases, and we will see the Kiran Yeshos, or the recent down that Cholong and Chui about the shape, Sheba Cholong with Namshat Shigi or Resource.
So those requested the teaching of the Dharma from the Bodhisattva prince. Please teach the Buddha Dharma. Saudasa asked. And Prince Chandra said, to do so, one must conduct oneself properly. A listener should conduct themselves in a certain way when listening to the Buddha Dharma. So while listening, one should listen from a lower place to an instructor in the Dharma speaking from a higher place. And at that time, the two were in the cave of Saudasa. They were in a cave, and Saudasa was on higher ground, and the Bodhisattva prince was on lower ground. So they swapped places, and Saudasa took off what he was wearing and made a cushion, a seat on the high ground for Prince Chandra. And then Prince Chandra continued, this is the way that one should listen to the Dharma from a lower place of respect and veneration for the teaching. And one should listen without anger or without any distractions to the mind, and listen with rapt attention. And the way in which one should listen, how it should be a form of rapt attention, is one should listen as though they had a thirst for nectar, and the teachings of the Dharma were the very nectar they were thirsty for. So listen in this way.
아니 지금 거기 최세세기 하자디 아니 주 가가지고 년두고도 가서 년두고보다 주 가가 되는 것을 내 시험을 제야다 아니 저남들 여기 남자 두고야다 어디서 자산 땡겨 아니 주 주와 보이나야 아니 주 파주 나냐라야 아니 년 고려야다 부바체야다 저 제가 여가 보고요 어디 땡겨요 그래서 제가 뒤에서마다 타마 안에 거랑 주 다 송야 뒤에도 되게 강하게 캐는 저 송, 아니 거랑이 녀고래가 쳐더니 기부 강다게 녀고래가 쳐더니 아니 거랑이 뒤 제보다 왜잘 땅에 단다보도 배 밀려녀가 근데 최소 딱이 노르샤 본다세 아니 가딘 사베가 치돌라 아니 거랑이 밖에 미망고 주시야 미디를 발로 사단도 건도 발로 아니 디네서도 그런 게 밀 소주 제야면 캐네 아니 그런 다시에 보도 발로 그런 게 소주 제야면 왔다 미샤 사야면 담제지 아니 디네서도 아니 여보다 와도 그런 게 아니 로마차네 오 근데 누기요 세단 되게 가가 딱 하나도 최고 되게 예시 지도 냠매체도 숨고 열어서
Sadasa requested teachings of the Dharma from Prince Chandra, and that was an illustration of the requirement that a disciple first request a teaching before any teaching may be conferred. This is required, so too is an acknowledgement of the proper time and place for Dharma teachings. One must distinguish between disciples for whom Dharma teachings are appropriate, any given Dharma teaching is appropriate, and those for whom it is not appropriate. Also, the proper conduct of a listener is described here through this story, and respect must be shown by the listener to the teacher. So in the end, Sadasa requested the teachings of Prince Chandra and understood the proper time and the proper behavior, proper conduct for a Dharma teaching. And following the Dharma teaching, his veneration and the way in which he paid his respects to the Bodhisattva Prince were reflected in his promise and his profound remorse for all the lives he had taken, and his promise to free all the princes he had imprisoned, and his promise never to eat human flesh again, his promise to release the princes he had captured. And all of this was an expression of the way in which he had, in these ways, become a disciple to his guru.
Oh yeah, that another the Yamni Haristo Dorjunish, Karishigi or Eslavna, another Toba Chebani, Toba Chedine, so the Anis Toba de Pe, Tolamado and Yamzulan Rang Simbu the Jartuba. I did some Toba Tikian and the Samjung Kedus and was Tebe 20 around Majeba, Samjung Toba Julake, Toba Tia, and the Samjung Toba Tia, Toba. and Gomjungi Molake, and Jama Suzuki Tobazo, and that Tuba Nation, Samba Nation, Gombe Tobadi, Jula Keva, Chiati, Toma Tujung the Putabu Weaver, Tujung Digi Tube 20, Samjung Malava, Yagu Weaver, Samjungi, Sambe 20, Gomjung Rang Jula Kego Weaver, or Digichan, Rebati Malaya, Tandala, and Petty soon the Chigi or Res. 딱 가다가 지금 가라서 지대기 수수기 미지지기 자샤이 바이나 아니 직박에 곧 한번 나와 뒤나는 내가 제거하지나 나와 한번 세번 찍는 거라는 고중에 맞추고 야고 걸어와 어디나 신진의 거를 빼지 않는 숨기 어려서.
Now in short, listening is the beginning of the practice, and it mustn't be wasted. The lessons of what one has heard must be applied and always practiced, applied to the mind. And with this proper practice of listening, the cause for later realization of the meaning of that which one has listened to is present. So one must listen and then make an effort not to forget the lessons one has learned, and then contemplate the lesson, contemplate the meaning, and improve one's comprehension of the meaning so that one may realize the meaning actually in one's mind. This is the process. It begins with listening, continues with retaining what one has heard, and is completed or brought to full development in the development of realization of the meaning. So don't lose your way as you listen and follow the example of Sadasa as you do.
Oh yeah, that being also true, then you remember the Sheba, and the church Lama the Loma church Shebe, Loma and the church Sheba, the Yembe, Joram Namshat, or the kitchen, that Tunjin to she took the budget de Taras, and that ring de Zamsha, and Jama, she shape a parent death, Mangoyama, did to she, and the that Lamrim go, then just she subject Tambo. She attended to the then the Lochita and the two said that Lamrim call a lever, that Lamrim Mandularin Chini, that's something Lamrim Jangi, Lamrim Logu said, that's something she needed to do, and go to the Lamrim go to you, so this is your response.
The proper practice begins with proper listening. It is likened to beginning the lunar month on the right day. If one makes a mistake as to the beginning of the lunar month, one will remain mistaken until the end of the lunar month. And so this is the presentation of how to listen and to give instruction in the Dharma. And with this concluding section on the 6 ideas, we will wrap up today's class. We won't dwell on or spend a lot of time on the qualities of the teacher, the instructor per se. This has been an introduction describing the proper way to listen to the teachings and the proper way to give instruction in the Dharma. And now, when we say we are beginning the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment in earnest at the beginning is how to properly rely upon the spiritual mentor. This is the beginning of the stages of the path to enlightenment in actuality, the very beginning, how to properly rely upon the spiritual mentor. Now, if anything's unclear or if there are any doubts, when we do have a question and answer, I think it's really beneficial. And so whatever doubts or whatever concerns or questions you have, raise them. And if I know in such a way that allows me to respond, I will. Or if I know a suitable response, I'll provide that. I think it's very beneficial.
Yeah.
Put the poisons and the mental afflictions the same, one and the same.
독숨당 영웅디 지크치키한주베.
독숨스의 명르와 이모숨들 독숨스는 명기 따져 가서 독세에 가서 곧 동네 지역이 위치에서 곧 독숨인 따.
Yes, they're synonymous, and the 3 poisons is another name for the mental afflictions given to the mental afflictions because they poison in the sense that they cause suffering.
Yeah,
question was, so Sudasa or Sudasa and Angumala, King Angumala, are they the same person?
Sudasa Buddha 그래서 소노칭화디 and 미직 규직. They're not the same person, but they're the same continuum.
Same continuum, right?
그런게 간다 좀 된 얘기로와 좀 된 얘기 간다데 세모 정한데 살 가져 맞게 두기지 버도 개와 코니도 개와는데 루규per 정도라고 가다도 좀 된데 개와 시도 세모 정한내로와 다디 개와 뭐마제 다다디 가서 시야디 루규 찍래 예세 따와 저도 좀 되게 개와 뭐마제 개보 강다디 세모 정한 개와 뭐마차 그래서 고라니 그래 지금 편도 제신 아니 들이 겨울이요. 좀 내려 고랑 깨럽 누유요와 어디나 누유 망고요.
This is the story of Sodasa and the Bodhisattva Prince Chandra is one of some 500, 600 stories of the relationship between the Buddha and who would become the Buddha and the other who would become Angulimala in their many past incarnations. In some 500, 600 life stories, there was this relationship. Then in the time of the Buddha, Shakyamuni, the person or the continuum that was Sardasa had become Angulimala. And these are contained, this is one story of many, but these stories are contained in the garland of life stories of the Buddha.
아니 그 섬지 대식으로 수수 겨 뭐막 루기야 지나시 지시에 인질의 패도 제야 그것도 맞아 간다지 수수기 나는 좀 되디디 그런게 다 뭐막 루기디 시 하나 어디 별랑 근데 수수기 지금 매일 패도 제면은 뭐 되대요 매일 내가 제외는 동의요 그래서 간다 담규디를 때는 랑게 수수기 냠내치야 빼준 하고 해야지도 루기디 시리어서.
And just as now you're training in the Great Treatise on the Stages of the Path, and then later your present time, your present studies will be used as an illustration of the way in which this individual, this realized individual, practiced originally in past lives. In the same way, the past stories, the stories of the Bodhisattvas in training, are used as illustrative examples of the way in which an individual practices and then goes about undertaking the well-being of others. And in the way in which they do achieve the well-being of others, their stories are illustrative, and in the ways that sometimes they harm others and experience the consequences of that, past stories are illustrative.
가지고 이동 쪽에서 어디 다 월나서도 월나서 타니고 통습지가 상하인 바시도 어디 나라 아니 어디 힌두비 대 상하는 인바체 엔나는 잘라빼 먹어도 힌두 남아져라 그런 잘라 먹고 다 보게 되도 그런 제마 기루주고 그 빼샤 먹고 하고는 세르모 먹고 하고는 그런 싸울 배샤도 제마 그런 신이다 겨왔네 겨와도 뭐한테 라지탄 게 아니 그거 보고 주주가도 잡아라 안 가만히나 마 나한테 들어오고 있어 나한테 지도 잡아 그 상호도 미로도 것도 로드 된다 아니 로드는 건도 로드 그런 게 경험만 있어 아니 디나랑에 잘라들데 예스코 잡아서도 와서 말아서 미 심지어 가리는 수도 겨와 가지고 로규디 다들 미지막이 하고 이제 시험도 어디나 지금다 강강한테 연구를 왔어.
There's a little temple outside of Varanasi, and it's a Hindu temple filled with all sorts of relics and precious things that a guru there in the Hindu tradition was keeping and protecting. And he kept them, preserved them, had all these things filling this little old temple. And then he died, and later was born in Rajasthan. And in Rajasthan, as a young boy, said to his parents, "I need to go to this place outside of Varanasi, and there are things I'm acquainted with already there, and so I'm going to go there." And went there, and rather before he had died, he had buried many precious things, valuable things, under the floor. So then he died, was in Rajasthan. Then he came from Rajasthan to Varanasi, and sure enough, as he excavated there, he exposed the skeletal remains of his past incarnation, and then there was all the wealth there too. And these continuing re-embodiments that are expressions and related to the continuation of our practices are all about us.
얘기 가르쳐 도나 체에서나 이 상주 신이저와 이래 미기 되었던 그 겨와치만 레베스 되었던 이내 코 상주신이 겨와치만 말했어 켈링미도 이내다 거기 가서 나 뭐마 미디 그루디 세데 그 로디 잘라텐데스 열었다 오늘 라투네 고 렌쟁에서 나서 겨와치만 생기디 가서 켈레마 테스칼 하고 왔어. 가서 고 오늘 지난 때들 때 겨와치마 이베 그런 대시샤가 잡수도 이내 미콜 들어왔던데 그 겨와치마를 해도 겨와치마 말을 그 켈링입니다. 그래서 어디서 내 삼바나 돈한테 몰래는 게 셈나 대유 대신 그냥 시.
Also the animidi ani kewa ani ngamadi killing yorbe the Quran.
Quran다 보고도 보고 진주로 와. 그런 투어다 미신박 상주신이요.
是吧？是吧？
상주신이들 겨치마 거기 겨치마를 겨치마 볼 때. 저당.
是。
그런 겨치마이 뭐 그런 캘링도 어떻게 뭐 캘링도. 겨치마를 라브기미도 내게미도. 이내 거기 겨치마 임바 그런 게 겨치마 보고도 임바디 그 프로세스. 이내 먼저 겨치마 생긴데 딱 여바기. 치료 일단 빼도 신이야 걸어. 그래서 야고 도와서는 있으면 야한테 해서.
Now this story's interesting in that the child, when this story was reported by a reporter, obviously the press reporter, because the general consensus is there is against any past lives, and the way that the press reporter phrased the question when he was interviewing this young boy is this evidence of past and future lives? And the little boy, acquainted as he is with the sort of general consensus that there are no such things, said no, it's not that. But he was providing a very instance of proof of it. His experience and his coming there to investigate what he had intuited is proof of a past life and his re-embodiment. But it's a difficult to get an explicit statement of that because of the general consensus at this time about it, the public opinion.
제가 남바이나 겨 치마 여바디 예바제 예소나 아니 겨 치마 야고 거래 고마래 겨 치마 간 수수디 안데 직 수수 겨 치마지 여바지 수수 이체 수수기 아니 직 도나 여바다 직래나 아니 다 겨 치마 야고 고고 여바디 아니 윤진들이로 와 딜레바이나 아니 따와치마 야고 소고이다 야고 고고이나 야고 소고다 야고디 칸데 소고스나 달린 세딩 소고고 여바디 까마도 두스 내유리 남샤데 데 개침부시다 차대요라서.
From the standpoint of Buddhists, past lives are when a past life, conviction in past lives is developed, then naturally subsequent lives are inferentially, posited naturally. And therefore one will be inclined to, if there are future lives, to ensure that the future lives are constructive and positive for each person. And then with that inclination, then one is invested in seeing to it that happens. And to see to it that a future life is constructive for a person, one must ensure it by what they do in the present life. And so this is the sort of the progression of thought from a Buddhist standpoint.
Zoom participant has a question. Thank you so much for the teaching, Geshe-la. The question is, what is the best way to avoid becoming callous to the Dhamma? Is it simply to consistently practice what we have probably listened to? And are there any additional things to protect ourselves from the danger of becoming callous of the Dhamma?
아니 출라 제시어라. 출라 주제 아니 마쇼리알라 가르치 그래.
개정부지다. 최대 마셔셔로 아주 최고 퇴바데 주구주구 냠선에 두어져라. 퇴바다 남산 냠nen치 두어져라. 뒷백해 주고 해서. 퇴베 되는데 아니 직퇴 야나메다 직퇴 마고퇴 아니 제마 퇴바 마고치 아니 냠nen메도 아니 최단 샘디 버루 동바시우지라 아니 샘디 최디게 샘디 교류다 배마도 찾아서 대단다 안당아도 최제 고야지 미 최제가 고바카레 최디 퇴발라 때문에 라게 샘디 유었던 거다. 어서 라게 샘 마시워요는 시워서야 라게 샘 강에 유나 강에 바세야 아니 어디로 제가 뒤 가르쳐 태워봐 되게 되는데 맞아봐. 아니 그 남자는 카드고도 나는 딱 두어서 보러와. 어디 맞아봐 있는 태워봐 마고지 아니 배 저거 저기 이제 수마고지 가로지 퇴조가 다 태워서 되는 게 하고 되는 게 시에서 뭐 쓰면은 되지래지는 되게 최 퇴조가 말로 쓰면 요당 현 패마도 새로 어디기 전에 냠내셔야 돼. 퇴배 되는데 맞아봐는 누구누구 냠내지 돼야 어떻게 해준 거야 그래서
Well, this is a very important question. What one must do is immediately implement the meaning of what one hears. When one listens to something, there's a meaning to it, and then one gets in the habit of disregarding it, listening at one time, encountering the meaning, and then disregarding it when they leave. Gradually, an increasingly large gap begins to separate the teaching from the mind, and then it will be. Then the teachings cannot have any effectiveness, cannot affect the person's mind anymore. So immediately apply the meaning such that the mind changes. So change the mind based upon the meaning of what one has heard. Change the mind, pacify the unruly mind, eliminate the distress and the discontents of the mind. Eliminate them based on the meaning of what one has heard. And don't forget what you have heard, and immediately apply all that you have heard. Do not get in the habit of listening again and again, and then thinking to yourself, I've heard this already, I've heard this countless times already. When this is the habit, then there'll be no change in your thinking, and no improvement.
어디 백한데 송아스나 이시 쟁아 선저와 이시 쟁아 무슨 든든모 좀 가다 봐요. 그시 쟁아 오라 누워 냠내는 거로 누워 냠내는 누에나 마 꼬바 시스네 대세지거라고 다 제가 누에 냠내는 다 수수기 소다기 도바 켈란샤도 심지는 내가 좀 지조고 심지는 내지 빵으로 와 일단 코랑기 가르쳐서는 대인들은 동기 빠바스 등을 하고 일단 동기 빠바 등들은 두알로 되지만 아니 심지는 내지 빵으로 했어 이 빵도 좀 아니 그래서 랑기 심지기 아니 시아다 제들로 농축이며 되지 까셔 그래도 그런 돈 빠바 등이 보다 땅에 심지는 내지 제셔 뒤문도 섬람산 대인이 막히지는 육샤라고 치러 담가는 맞으러 육샤로 아니 야지 배절로 되지 아니 가로지를 유타고 아니 직박에 균형이 되는 교우 여사들 아니 심지는 빠바들 때가 아니 믹스해 같이 사람이 최고냐면 영향을 치도록 고팽기 유관에서 믹스해 나와요. 근데 그래서 믹스 단계 땅한테 믹스해도 아니 땅에 뜨면 고 말랑지 마치 동바고 연결하는 땡땡으로 와. 제가 그 당고 그래서 통하다 나서 마 아니 남산 어제 믹스도 냉도 어제 지나시 냠낸데 아니 쳔바다 누구 주고 치토 버려. 이 유나 아니 거기 최대의 말이야. 시라 팽그래서
The story of Chenmo, who composed the 7 points of mind training, illustrates how one should immediately apply the teachings. Chenmo was in a remote area in a retreat in a hut, and he was reading the Vinaya. And as he was reading the Vinaya, which requires that once one has taken the pratimoksha vows, one abstain from harming sentient beings, from taking the lives of sentient beings. There's no violence to be done to sentient beings once one has taken the pratimoksha vows. As Chenmo was reading the pratimoksha, rather reading the Vinaya, he came to a section on cushions and seats, and there it said that if there were a leather cushion or a seat, a bhikshu observing the pratimoksha vows mustn't sit on it, as this is a form of violence to animals. And he was sitting on a bearskin mat, and so reading that, he immediately thought, "Oh, here I am failing to observe this precept and doing violence to sentient beings." And he got up and removed the mat and threw it out of his house, threw it out of his retreat hut. And then he continued reading the Vinaya. And as he read on, he found that there were exceptions made to the material from which seats may be made in remote areas where there aren't other facilities to the meditator, and found that there are exceptions that can be made if one is in a remote area. So learning that there were exceptions, and this would count as an exception as he was in a remote area, he went out and retrieved the bearskin mat and climbed back on top of it, observing the Vinaya immediately. So this is an instance of how practice may be applied immediately based upon what one has studied.
Yeah,
that was that clear?
That is more
so talking about the mental afflictions, how does one eliminate jealousy, envy, resentment, and anger? And like through that, is the thoughts first, or the putting the words as a result of those thoughts into action, or the physical action of acting upon those thoughts? And how does one eliminate all of that entirely?
Oh yeah, that's the thing. Nyumongi dane the chato dan kunzin dan ani shedan la so the nyumbo yore. Dene ani tenzo ani krisa kiwatsam ilo dan ani samlo digi wangi ani mosu ani nubake dan kunzin che dan ani jindur che la sopa deni durna lodan kiwi lodan ani mosu ani chebe chawa ti durna kagi dogare ani nika kandis pang.
So chidanta zawa nyumu tuksum lagirwa zawa nyumu tuksum ta lo chebe rimba mangbu yore lo chebe rimba pena ngazo tanda chidang nyumu chedang xiandu omo chukwa na ishiginda nyumu chedang xiandu tangbu docha kigir docha di 아니 당부 되자 시외 남바지스 되자 스티디 담바 때 미드마서 미 시외 시주었다 샘 잠보였다 나고 되자 친구 차도 아니 갈래갈래 콘도 교로라고 세단 세단을 교로다 아니 세단을 교 콘도 차다 아니 시에 콘도 주잖아 얘네 콘도가 다바 내게 뭐도 다시 봐 개요 말와 세단 당부 시외 남바지 네 트라고 남바지 깨도 트라 남바지 깨도 어디 레스트 지단이 뭐 킬로미터 제베나 다 빼나 콘도도 이베나 콘도 크람 나로라 콘도 될라 콘도 트루다 구다 근데 이와 뭐 여러서 다 지단 콘도 거랑 이와지도 당부 데레다 콩 프로스 당부 크랑 에 셈데라 멜 트로체 마디 셈나 룽지레 버와 달리네 딜레데 딜레기 쿤지지레 버 쿤지 수도 마땅하도 빼나 콘도 사와 있나야 콘도 되기 내가 좀 내줘야 돼 친구도 여마다 지단 그런 콘도 임바 좀 딱 콘도 되기 제일 셈데 슉쳐지는 쿤지리기 아니 봐줘야 요 내가 제다 아니 지금 엄마 내줘라 내렌테야다 모두 내가 끼야 삼도 되어와 어디 군지리 하고서 군지기 군지리도 좀 아니 다 손으로 수조치라 자면 슈심불에 살와 어디게 아니 수수 다 간다 밀려가게 수수라지 보내야 간다 군지들이 지고라서 콘도 그랑기다 지난 깨봤다면 나도 대가 듣네 싶고요 말했어 뒤집어 손으로서 그냥 이제
The root mental afflictions in their arising in the mind arise in the sequential way, or rather there are stages and steps to their production as they come about. And so I'm going to look for a moment to the Madhyamaka Avatara for its presentation on how this goes. Attachment is present in a person, and they appear pacific, they appear calm. There's attachment there, but their appearance is calm. And then with the development of anger, a momentary development, emergence of anger, they'll begin to take on a different aspect, a more aggressive one. And then following that, they'll be so taken under the sway of that mental affliction of anger that they have no recourse anymore but to do violence to another. So in anger, generally, there are 6 or 9 different aspects or divisions that may be given to anger. But in the first, you may recognize that anger that is just an agitation or a frustration will first arise. And that alone isn't necessarily so forceful. It won't cause one to harm another person. But once anger is followed by a vengefulness, and a person wants to retaliate, wishes to exact some sort of revenge for a harm done to them. In any case, there's a motivation to retaliate. With that, the person has become, their behavior is sort of now less likely to be reined in at all. And then a person will go out and do violence to somebody. So.
Oh, yeah, that kind of remote the Canada, Captain Nimbu, Panja Indu, Panya Nimbu was. Just I mean, to open the Timul Chashavana, Timula, or Tony Combat, Timu Nimburwa, Timul Captain Suja Maribal, Captain Sujagre, the way she Jawa, or Tony to the Sheriff John, Tony to the Sheriff said, Timu Nimbur. Shedang Nimbu Chambara. Chamba Gomundu, Shedan, Ranshing Ma Chungu. Shedan Shuchumuja, Chamba Chungu, we got to be. Not the Chaginibu Meduba Goma. Mizama Goma, Meduba Gomasua, Wadi, and Kare, the Chaginibu. What did that the other was Mambunamo, this one, Richana, and Chedan saying, Jibu Chumu, and got the legend, she is another to give Pemangu.
Now, in the series, as a mental affliction arises, or there will be at each moment a proper antidote to that aspect of the mental affliction. Now, just making it clear through these 3 mental afflictions of ignorance. Ignorance has an antidote in emptiness, meditation on emptiness that gives rise to the wisdom realizing emptiness. The wisdom realizing emptiness is the antidote, the direct antidote to ignorance. The direct antidote to anger is love. And they are in a relationship wherein great anger prevents there being great love. Great love prevents there from being great anger. And the third mental affliction of desirous attachment has for its antidote meditation on impurity of the human body. Now, these 3 are antidotes to these 3 primary mental afflictions. Now, when we get into the section of the Great Treatise on the Stages of the Path to Enlightenment for the individual of lesser capacity, in which karmic causality is described, there we will develop this further. Any others?
Yeah.
That they meet you.
Yeah, fuck this shit.
Yeah, machine.
Yeah. Yeah, that the another theory, another homage banana. Chitar sang it, I taught on the mouth, the 2000. Chitar sang it, I taught on the mouth. Oh, that is the way she down, the more down, the way she Chambatan, Conro, the Jata, Mituba, sang Kilo Jagua, Kilo to Jagu Zamba, but she done it. You go saw, somebody, the mass, 잠바디 슈침부 지고 사회에나 공로도 마 쇼로와 디나시 리바이 시디 슈침부에나 디모도 마 정도 디모 슈침부려나 리바이 마 정도로 어제 키로자 상나시레스 잠바다 이 공로니부디 कोई खबदेर मिदु बहुतां दोजा निबुदी खबदेर रिपोई इसीता मारे बनी खबदे होती न किलो क्या नहीं किलो ना चिक चिको चाहे चिक सारो चिक जो होती रे रेसों चिदर संग तानी थोड़ा तानी मावा होती पे सों मजबूत
These are the mental afflictions, and their antidote are weights on a scale. And so when you have a scale and you have anger on one pan and love on the other, when there's great anger, then it weighs down the love. When there's great love, then it weighs down the anger. And the same with the wisdom intelligence. When it is very heavy, then ignorance, it weighs down ignorance. When ignorance is very heavy, then it weighs down intelligent wisdom. And when the meditation on the unseemliness and impurity of the human body is heavy, it weighs down the scales, and its pan falls, and desirous attachment rises. And when desirous attachment is very great, it pulls the pan down on the scale, and the meditation on the impurity and unseemliness of the human body is pulled up. And because they are opposites, and they're like weights on a scale.
콘도스에서 뭐 콘도 생애대 아니 나도 삼는 이지미지 콘도스들 감상배 작고체 되네 말에 간주 깨지 시에가 있는 미지 깨지 시에서나 랑이 딜 세미나를 마수해 봐지 세미나를 마기버도 담아 되어 대마도를 찾거나 어디에 콘도라고 콘도스도 이지미지 아니 잠대 잡하게 지금 배 제가 도전에 지금 말 콘도스 생애대 세미나를 빼나가지고 직 아주 깨지 직 마딩네 남산 세미나를 마대 책도 아니 직 연도 아주 레가로 지내 직 마딩 남산도 세미나를 마대 책도 어디 주가 요 콘도 다 콘도들 숙치 좀 망고 열어 아니 콘도들 아니 직 릭답에 망고 열다 수술을 무엇을 내봐 아니 수술 릭네 내봐 아니 수술 슈네 내봐 이제 마음을 내봐 열어 뭐만 사교 열어 어디 주가 콘도가 나는 열어서
Now, anger isn't only the sort of vicious aspect that we're familiar with, or like an attack or something like that. It's also anger that we're experiencing when we're intolerant. When someone says something and we're a bit frustrated and intolerant, and don't just accept it, but experience some form of intolerance. This is anger too. It doesn't have to be that anger is only that which causes you to lash out or something like that. And anger is of many different kinds and intensities. And sometimes the justification for anger is that someone has directly harmed you. Sometimes it's that someone has indirectly harmed you. Someone has influenced things in such a way that you've been harmed. There are different intensities and causes for angry response.
맞게다 차도다 뭐라고 콘도고 절레나 이거래서
jealousy
맞게
and pride, these are forms of anger.
뭐야 뒷바 간다 콘도고 뒷바 저러와 뒷바는 지고 차쇼 두셔들해서
And of all the forms of mental afflictions, anger is the very worst.
이거 다 가워요. 오늘 미술레시 이거 예마이 어머지고 줘요. 미술레시 이거 서버 고마도 받이 하나 가서 배나 가서 팀나를 잡아이나 그배 찍고 미술에다 거 고만 여기다 쉬고 두자를 찍으러 왔어. 오늘 삼로 땅에 이거 제바이나 디조 감각이 규 가르쳐 되었으나 공동을 얻어 미술가. 공동되게 규칙 제가 공동되게 뒷바 단단 것을 내주고 무튼 내버 지기를 아니 거기 배 간다를 거기 개와신다 개라 뺀도가 치고 개도 하서 제가 뺀디고 치고 공부 미수가 생겼다 디베난 도쇼들에서
As Shantideva says, anger is anger is the Chandrakirti. The Chandrakirti says anger is the very worst form of mental afflictions, and it is because the intolerance of anger will go on to prevent and hinder virtuous activities in the future too. Because one thinks that I've been harmed in this way and will continue to be harmed in this way, and in that way, anger and intolerance continues in a person, limiting one's ability to practice constructive actions in the future. It is anger actually that is the cause of all discontents, all problems. It is that which destroys roots of virtue. It is that which incites non-virtue in every case. It is that which disrupts and disorders society generally too. That which divides two people will inevitably be anger. That which divides two nations will inevitably be anger. Anger underlies all divisions. So if you recognize these faults, these drawbacks, then the moment there's a flicker of anger, you can suppress it. Know to suppress it.
Lamrim Chenmo chebe gyawa di ani chungro mando la mando chidol imani nima chere doya da rangi bilo toba kya ani shen la pen toba da rangi niriki ne na za shiwa da ani sonam yachenmo pewe chidol la ngo manam yabu chiro chis ani manam da ngo dingi yin sungo chi.
So then we'll end class here, and we have tea and fruits and things outside, so we can go outside and relax and talk a little bit. We can relax because it's Sunday and it's a holiday, and we will dedicate the virtue of listening to the Dharma and teaching the Dharma in such a way that it isn't lost, that we preserve it, and that we increase the virtue and the merit of this practice. Dedicate the merit in such a way that it fosters realization in our minds, and also brings an end to strife in the world, to illness, and to all conflict, and gives rise and increases merit for all. So with this in mind, we can dedicate the merit through our closing prayers. Page 12.
Tenerindu bele sonini radara yamba kanshi sabate lume mare gidon rowaru nale tajulu che tema sumbe sera gudu ya jambe yanji sewe jesone Nembe remba kuzan lanji jo nene rube yamani Rangi shishin tope lanji ne shuda sewe rangi lanji Rue yiji mba seje ne jave temba yuri se chuchi Yambarinjin shoji majaba, jabyan yambar yubi shoge. Yinji chenpo yira jeba yi, pende teje sewar jeba. Seji jawe mejun tele, lejo chanju namji rinpe nyam. Tadu namji yila pedeji, jawe zeba rinpu kyonjuji. Lazan rube tunjen ruje jin, gegen seje medami. Sera gundu yawe mabayi, namda namda rewa manjuji. Kaze teba jola jujuji, tujin jola zumadi. Tuden namje tadu proteji, jashi jaso chugun jajuji.
From my two collections, vast in space, that I have amassed, from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose mind, wisdom, eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all my lives, my Jushu. May I find the best of the paths of the complete teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by practicing. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the points of the path as I have discerned them. May I uphold Buddha's teachings for a very long time. With my heart going out with great compassion, in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread or once spread have declined, may I offer this treasure of happiness to aid all sentient beings. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time by following the complete graduated path to enlightenment and the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all human and non-human beings have eliminated adversity and make things conducive for practicing the paths, never be parted in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes an effort to act in accordance with the tenfold line on virtuous practices, may you always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere.
Dagi jinye zabe dewa di tena roa kuna ramgen. Kevara jesu losan raba yi tembe nimbo rendu seji. Are rave kove shingande pena dewa maru Jere sewa tinzi jago yi jabe sinzi mardu dengyuruji. Jambe bawo jizar kemba na kundu sambo leyan yejinde. Eda kunye jesu daloje yewa dida tamje radu. Duzo jebe yewa tamje je ngawa kama shodu mabane. Dagi jebe zawa digu jan sambo chuje radu mawargi. Jambe jo remboje manje prana jeyuchi. Jewa nyamba meba ya kone kondu rewarshu.
I dedicate whatever virtues I have ever collected for the benefit of the teachings and of sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drakpa to shine forever. In the land encircled by snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good, all powerful Chenmo, Tenzin Gyatso. Please remain until psychic existence is ended. Just as the brave Manjushri and Samantabhadra too realize things as they are, also I dedicate all these merits in the best way, that I may follow their perfect example. I dedicate all these roots of virtue, with the dedication praised as the best, by the victorious thus gone ones of the three times, so that I might perform the noble Bodhisattva's deeds. May the supreme jewel Bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Thank you. There, our Sunday class has come to an end. Okay. Oh, there's food too. We have food in the dining room.